Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's GGNA webinar on strategies for converting ticket buyers and members to donors. I'm Anthony Hale from the marketing team here at GGNA, and we're very excited for you to join us for today's session. Before we begin, I just want to go over some technical details. We ask that if you can, please log into WebEx before dialing in. Once you launch the webinar, then a window will appear on your screen similar to what you're seeing here on slide 1. If you've already called in, please hang up and follow the instructions in the window to dial in. Then we will be able to associate your phone with your name. Next, we may ask you some yes or no questions during the session. Please look at the slide on the screen right now to see where you can answer yes or no. It's the green checkbox or the red X. Just to test that it's working, if you are all looking forward to the fall season, please answer yes now. All right, it looks like there's nobody that's not looking forward to fall. Also there, please notice the raise your hand button. During the session, your phone will be muted. If you want to ask us a question, please raise your hand, and that will signal to me that you want to ask Eric and Kat a question, and I will unmute you so that you can speak with them. We also encourage you to use the chat panel shown on slide 3 in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen for any questions or comments during the session. Please notice that we ask you to direct your questions to all panelists so that Eric, Kat, and I can see it and field the question. At the end of today's session, we're also going to ask everyone to take a 1-minute survey that will show up there, so please stick around for that. Lastly, if at any point during the webinar you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please send me an email at ahoell@grenzglier.com or call our meeting provider WebEx directly at 866-229-3239. With that, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Eric Snook is Vice President at GGNA, bringing almost 30 years of experience as a fundraiser and a consultant for a broad range of colleges, universities, and cultural organizations. Prior to GGNA, Eric was Vice President of Advancement for the Interlochen Center for the Arts, a private arts education institution that draws young artists from around the world. At Interlochen, he created a unified advancement program that secured record levels of support and generated additional revenue through the creation of new programming. He has also served as a board member in 2 districts of the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. Joining him is Kat Banakis, Director of Strategic Implementation at GGNA. As part of our analytics team, Kat assists clients to enhance their prospect management and research efforts and has worked with some of the premier performing and visual arts organizations nationwide to evaluate current prospect research programs, identify opportunities for growth, train staff, and guide the planning and execution of major GIST campaigns. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kat and Eric.
Thank you, Anthony. We are just delighted to be able to be part of this presentation today. With the enthusiasm for the signups, it is clear that this is an important issue to many of you, and we hope that it is a collaborative time that we have together. We do want to give a caveat that is important and also humbling, which is that this is an incredibly important and exciting topic, and the good news is that there are many different strategies for looking at ways to move people along the pipeline from ticket buyers to members to upgrade to donors. But unfortunately, there is no magic silver bullet. Eric?
Thanks, Kat, and thanks very much, everyone, for joining us today. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. As Kat said, we know this topic, donor acquisition, is one that's really always of interest, and we hope that everybody gets at least one good idea from the presentation and the discussion. And let me just encourage you, echo what Anthony said, to use the chat box to share both your own knowledge and experience as well as to ask us questions as we go through the session today. We're very much looking forward to the conversation. Kat?
Great. Thank you, Eric. So to begin, I just wanted to give an overview of how we're going to be dividing our time up today. We're going to start by looking at various strategies for moving people from ticket buyers to general membership to upgrades to donors. Then we're going to move into a more in-depth case study on the Wisconsin Historical Society. And then to end, we're going to give some broad self-assessment tools so that you and your teams can begin to think about ways to plug into some of the ideas and assess where you are in your organization. Most of our examples today are going to be taken from arts and culture organizations, but certainly the same concepts apply whether your ticket buyers are for athletic events at an institution of higher ed, or they're buying tickets to galas or other events. I know that we have a broad range of attendees here today, so there are a couple steps of translation for how the exact examples apply, but the concepts certainly are evergreen throughout. As we're going to begin looking at ticket buyers and members, one of the foci that we'll have overall is identifying the best prospects and the best candidates for moving people along the pipeline. Not every ticket buyer is a great candidate for membership, nor is every member the best candidate for membership upgrade. So part of what we were trying to do was to gather wisdom around the best prospects for these initiatives. So we want to start out by looking at different ticket buyer behavior. And Anthony, I'm going to ask that you launch our first survey. And if all of you could participate there in your bars. Every encounter with ticket buyers is an opportunity to learn more about them. Certainly, this is somewhat easier when people buy tickets online because in online purchases, they are more accustomed to giving away information about themselves, their address, their phone number, their email address. Whereas in walk-up ticket purchases, they tend to be more transactional in just paying for it. But there are multiple opportunities for getting more information about your ticket buyers, even when they're walk-ups. Some of our favorite examples include if you have barcodes on your tickets, that you can track which locations people go to, if it was a museum, into different exhibits, that sort of thing, to see where they are inclined to go. There can be sign-up opportunities at kiosks when they make initial purchases to sign up for an affinity group newsletter or something like that, so you're learning more about what they're interested in, as well as getting their contact information. And also the opportunity to use the ticket stubs themselves for raffle tickets, that people would fill out their name and contact information on the back of the ticket stub and drop it in a fishbowl either as they exit, then you have their contact info, or at specific locations within the institution, whereby you find out what aspects of the institution they're interested in. And Eric, you had some as well.
Yes, and as Kat is saying, anytime you're selling stuff, it's an obvious opportunity to get name and address information. But really, anytime you have people gathered, you have an opportunity if you just think a little bit creatively about how you might get at some of that information. There are several wonderful arts organizations I'm familiar with that make a fine art of what they describe as line wrangling. But this means is they know there will be occasions when there will be people standing in line, and they see those as great cultivational information gathering moments, and they assign volunteers and staff to work their way up and down the line and build goodwill and to ask for data that can be used in pursuing the goals of those organizations. As Kat said, it's easy to think about these moments with athletic events or artistic events or fundraising events, but I really can't think of any nonprofit that doesn't have some kind of community of supporters. And that community generally divides into those who are active and those who are just kind of passing through your sphere of influence. With a little bit of forethought, you can know in advance who is going to be passing through that sphere of influence that's interesting. And then the challenge becomes, what do you do with that information? And that's what we're going to talk about next.
Thanks, Eric. And based on the survey results of those of you who wrote in, it looks like many of you are doing surveys and sign-up sheets already, some raffles, and that there are opportunities to begin using techniques that have not been used at your organization heretofore. And building on what Eric just said, any encounter with your ticket buyers is also an opportunity to find out who of them is interested in the organization overall and in having a richer experience than just that initial entrance or transaction. The Utah Shakespeare Festival is a whole weekend opportunity, and they offer orientations, post-show discussions, costume and prop seminars for free, backstage tours, scene change tours, and they are small enough that their gift officers are able to have an eyes-on policy of seeing who attends the different collateral services and to be able to follow up with them. But of course, the same concept could apply with participating in similar events and having people fill out a survey at the end, tracking their tickets, sign up, something like that. So getting a better sense for who's involved in the organization. And there is also an opportunity to find out who's involved, interested philanthropically in your organization as well. I know many places are experimenting with roundup campaigns of inviting ticket buyers to round up to the nearest $5 or $10 increment to make a donation as the difference between the cost of the transaction and a donation to the organization. However, there is not necessarily industry-wide agreement on the wisdom of this.
The counter-argument for what we're calling a roundup campaign is that it short-circuits your actual planned solicitation activity by kind of letting people off with a smaller gift than the one you might wish to ask for. Many institutions like the self-identification nature of a roundup campaign because people who are willing to do that may be the ones who are most likely to be more amenable to future solicitations. But of course, you do run a risk when you give people the opportunity to legitimately say that they've made a gift when that gift is only $5 or $10 or $15. The opportunity to go back is always there, of course, but the counter-argument is lead with your strongest ask, your most persuasive case first, and maybe asking someone to round up a purchase price is neither of those things. I always say to friends and clients, this is a perfect question to test in your program. It's very approachable to gather data about whether or not it works better with or better without. So there is no one-size-fits-all answer, but it's a good question to explore.
Absolutely. And the last thing we want to look at in terms of ticket buyers is screening ticket buyers for their capacity. Anthony, would you kick off our next poll? Many organizations have started wealth screening ticket buyers in one way or another. And the timing of when and how one does this varies by the organization and their ability to get the data somewhere and follow up with it and when that happens. One West Coast Performing Arts organization that we work with screens ticket buyers quarterly and then has more seasoned callers call the higher rated prospects in their follow-up and initiative for membership. On the other hand, a university theater that we work with in the Northeast screens their ticket buyers a week before the performance, knowing that they're going to be missing out on some ticket buyers who buy closer to the date. But for them, that is the window that seems to work. They screen them a week ahead of time, run the top 25 or so folks by capacity against the university-wide donor database, and then their gift officers select, of those 25 who've been matched, 5 prospects that they are interested in targeting at the performance. They email them 48 hours ahead of time to introduce themselves and say that they'll be following up with them. And then at the performance itself, the gift officers have the prospects' seat numbers in hand, and either before the performance or at intermission, go up and introduce themselves and say that they are so grateful for the folks coming and look forward to hearing how they liked the performance. 48 hours afterwards, they then call or email to ask about how they enjoyed the performance and to see if they'd be interested in finding out more about the organization. Now, this institution has had great results with it. They've gotten a number of new committee members, as well as some major gifts, and certainly the start of membership upgrades. In every initiative, though, that we're looking at in terms of ticket buyers, what we find out about folks is key to how we follow up with them, what they're interested in, what their capacity is, and being able to know more about them in order to target limited organizational resources as best as possible. Anthony, could we post the results of the poll? Oh, or maybe not. Great. So it looks like some are screening before. Those who screens tend to screen before overall, and many do not screen at this point. So that's an exciting opportunity to begin doing that. I'm going to just pause here and see if there are any questions or comments about ticket buyers. We have a question about collecting guest contact information at an event. Certainly, there is the ever popular inviting people to use sign-ups for specific follow-ups, interest areas, surveying them at the event. Eric, do you have thoughts on this?
It's always a sticky one because you want your supporters and donors to introduce your organization to other people through the course of this event. And it can be sometimes a little ticklish to say to your good supporter, by the way, we'd like the names and addresses of all the people you're bringing with. And I think that events where name tags are present really make this a lot easier, because you can always explain to the person who is buying the table or buying the tickets that we would like everyone to have a name tag, and by providing that information in advance, you at least get a little bit of a heads up, and it's easy to ask, what is your guest's name and where are they coming from? That's, I think, the best early intervention, makes it most easy.
And if any of you have wisdom in the room on practices that have worked well for you, we would be open to help Katie on that as well.
Always a good idea to encourage staff members and volunteers who are present to be seeking this information in their one-on-one conversations, to be very active listeners and help you understand who's in the room, even if that happens after the event. People who aren't reminded that this is information that's important may not be seeking it in quite the same manner.
So that everyone on the team is a fundraiser. All right. So let's move on to some concepts around membership.
Kat, before you do that, I'm just looking at this one question about a very large event with 3,600 guests, and I don't have a fast answer to that one, Jennifer, but I would say you might, for those sponsors and friends who are bringing big parties, I think it's certainly possible to ask them in advance of the event whether or not there's anybody they are bringing they would like the organization to pay some particular attention to, and why. So if I'm a sponsor of your organization and I'm bringing the richest family in town, I might tell you that, and that will give you a kind of early warning about not only what you might want to do during the course of the event, but who's really thinking about and helping the organization through the course of this event, and who's just rounding up the usual cast of characters for a lovely evening. All of those guests are, of course, 100% welcome and appreciated, but there are two different scenarios at work there, and by asking in advance, you maybe get a clue as to where your best opportunities lie. That's a tough one, though, with that many people at any given venue.
I had a question about that an organization has a tough time getting names of ticket buyers, and that is a pervasive problem. And frequently people know exactly what they're doing in not giving actual names, as they don't want follow-up. And by and large, in some ways, you just have to work with the names that you do have, because if there aren't names and addresses and people have chosen not to give those on purpose, you're sort of strung on there. What about you, Eric?
I agree with that assessment, and I would just say use the opportunity of the event to present your organization in such a way that the people who are in the room are going to want to give you their name and information for whatever follow-up reasons you can envision, whether it's the newsletters or groups that Kat was mentioning earlier, or the raffle prize that's in the room, or simply because they're interested in the good work you're doing and they want to learn more. Just make sure that there are plenty of ways for people to identify themselves to you through the course of the evening and in whatever follow-up you are able to arrange. If people want to keep their names to themselves, they will, and maybe that's telling you something about how much time and energy you want to spend following up. So, also a toughie.
So let's look at who it may make sense to focus on for membership upgrade opportunities. When we're beginning with moving ticket buyers into members and now baseline members, into membership upgrade ideas. One question first to consider is who has taken advantage of their membership benefits so far and has become more involved in the organization by showing up. And related to that, who based on geography and capacity is most likely to take advantage of membership benefits. If you have a family who lives out of state and has purchased a membership because it was the most economical way for them to attend an event, that's a very different member than somebody who's living locally and has the capacity to become more involved. And who historically, looking back at your donors, have been your best demographic segments? There are a number of different ways to regress out your best donors from your database. You can analyze your donors based on zip code and age if you have that information. And there are also a number of marketing and demographic services that you can add on for a nominal fee to your donor database to figure out who have been your best performing demographic segments. One service that we have used frequently here at the firm is Prism Claritas, and they divide the country into 66 different household profiles, and they give them different names and are able to know down to the household level what these households tend to consume and read and buy and spend their time doing. And if you're interested more, you can visit the website here to learn more about them. But one of the ways that we've used this frequently with clients is looking at who their best performing segments have been. So in looking at this slide, we can see that for this organization, which is an arts organization, their top performing segments are upper crust, blue blood estates, pools and patios, so on. And we're measuring performance by percentage of donors who've given over $1,000. And by looking at historically who has performed well, one might be able to then do a similar analysis of your members to figure out who are your best prospects as future donors and making that jump from transactional membership into being more invested as philanthropic donors going forward. I want to turn now to look at some strategies for how to actually do those upgrades. Certainly easier said than done of knowing who might be candidates for upgrades and then actually doing the upgrades themselves. I want to begin by looking at general membership upgrades to higher levels. And the three examples we're going to look at actually are all from museums. Now, one museum knew that their general members were their best source for increased membership giving. And so they looked at general members who had the capacity to give at least $5,000 a year and had given $1,000 in a single recent fiscal year. And using this information, they created more targeted asks for this particular pool, in addition to their general mass upgrade appeal. And they surpassed their goal for new members at the upper levels, even as their general membership program declined in that year. Another museum looked at all those who were giving at the lowest membership level, but had clear capacity and consistent giving, and consistent membership, and sent them an invitation-style mailing to meet with the president and a featured artist at a gallery opening if they upgraded, and had their most successful campaign in their history. And a third museum had really lovely collateral material and annual reports left over from their previous campaign, and targeted the mailing of these excess reports to members who had been members for quite some time and had high capacity and were of a certain age, and sent the collateral with a cover letter from the president asking that, thanking them for their participation and inviting them to become more involved. And from that, got not only a number of membership upgrades, but also a significant major gift out of it, which is not necessarily common, but a great success story. Knowing something about one's members also allows the opportunity to engage board members and volunteers with membership upgrades. Another museum example, they looked at a pool of prospects with the capacity to give $25,000 annually, which, as one might expect, was relatively small. But they reviewed that list with their volunteer leaders and developed individualized strategies for approaching each of those prospects and surpassed their member upgrade goal, even as their other memberships remained the same. Another performing arts organization took their top members by capacity, similarly reviewed the list with their board, and this was a real opportunity for them to engage their board, who had been extremely reticent about getting involved philanthropically themselves. And what they did was they invited the board to look at the list, see if they knew any of them, and very simply on the annual campaign letters for the people that they knew of high capacity, a note was included from the board member making an introduction to their lead annual gift staff person as a way to have a point of contact and to engage the board with some really promising membership opportunities. And I would be interested to know from the group here, just by yes, no, if any of you have used the board for targeting high-level membership capacity. So it looks like a few have, which is great. The last thing I wanted to look at, and I think that this will probably generate the most questions as it has so far, is ways to use events for membership upgrade opportunities. We work with one museum that was really trying to do a targeted effort around planned giving and looked at their membership for capacity and age and did a series of targeted daytime events around a gallery opening for daytime lectures that involved tea and cookies at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. And in addition to the mailed invitation, there were phone follow-ups. And it was just for, again, members with capacity of a certain age. And it resulted in a planned gift as well as a painting donation in addition to overall membership upgrades, but it was really a targeted way to look at their older population and to have events that would appeal to them. Another organization that we're working with has found that their best committed donors overall are grandparents. And so they are doing an initiative of having targeted invites for events to bring children to on federal holidays, which is just a brilliant way to be able to reach out to grandparents who might have child care duty when daycare is not available full day or would make an overture of it, and to find out more about those donors and really build that relationship. So I want to pause again and see if there are some questions and comments around membership upgrade ideas, events, and board engagement on that. All right, well, if anything occurs to folks, please do write in. And Eric, I would love to hear your comments on anything we discussed, and also to pass over to you for our case study for today.
I think it's fascinating how looking across one subset of institutions, because you really gave us a lot of great examples there from museums, the wide variety of ideas and approaches that creative people have come up with to begin to get at some of these sticky wickets. And I would just say that I think it's a good example that there is no single silver bullet solution, but a little creative thought can really give an organization a leg up on some of these challenges. The case study that we're going to look at is rather interesting because the Wisconsin Historical Society had an annual fund campaign and a membership campaign, and never the two should meet in the course of any given year. They were more or less competing directly with themselves. And they really decided in 2010 that they were going to tackle this member-donor challenge head-on. And I think their experience really provides a useful lens for all of us to think about these issues and to maybe take some lessons from their experience. Before I tell you about what it is they did to address the dueling annual fund membership campaigns, let me tell you a little bit more about the organization just so you have some sense of them. The Wisconsin Historical Society is actually a state agency as well as an independent 501c3 organization. And it was founded in 1846. It's one of the largest, most active, and most diversified historical societies in the nation. So you know right from the get-go that they have a complicated story to tell with their state affiliation and their independent organization and this wide array of programs and services that they offer. 60% of their funding comes from the state. The other 40% comes from membership fees, admissions fees, trusts, funds, and grants. And as I said, it's a diverse agency. They provide help for families in Wisconsin with their own genealogical research. The Wisconsin Historical Society operates a number of historic sites and a museum. They're quite active in supporting classroom teachers throughout the state. They have a very active and ongoing research enterprise, and they serve as the official repository for documents from local and state governments. Their library, I should say, serves as the official repository. So that's a little quick overview of the Wisconsin Historical Society. Now, before 2009, they had this dueling annual and membership campaign, and about 25% of their members were donors. The good news for them was that they had a very solid history in this membership program, and if they could get you as a member for 2 or maybe 3 years, they found a very high retention rate, and that those members would likely stay with the society for 10 to 15, sometimes more years than that. The bad news was that they were running these 2 campaigns, and the expenses of those two programs were becoming pretty prohibitive. And of course, the demand on revenue was growing. 2009 was a difficult time for lots of places, and certainly the Wisconsin Historical Society no different. They had a lot of great things to work with in their kind of core vision of the way they were delivering their program. Some of what I would think of as the core elements of their approach, they really focus on providing members with experiences that engage them in the mission of the society. So membership has certain financial advantages, but the real boon to members is the opportunity to be more engaged and to learn and do more. Through their membership program, they work very hard to introduce their constituents to the society's various services, and you heard that wide array of things. So you might come through the door because you want to learn your family history and suddenly find out that there are a lot of resources there for your kids while they're in school. And that was because, or is because, the Historical Society works very hard to make sure you know the full scope of what they do. They have found over time that they have a strong effect in their appeals when they show how their works are affecting people in the state, and focusing on that classroom effort with children is a really good bet for them. They are very consistent in highlighting the message that your membership support made this possible in all their materials, but also within their facilities and by calling out donors at various events. They really make a point of the importance of membership support. And when you say retention to the folks at the Wisconsin Historical Society, they don't simply think about a series of appeals. They think about all the things that go on beyond the renewal process, what ongoing strategies they can offer for involvement beyond a simple ask. So what they did when they were confronting this annual campaign membership campaign in 2009 is they decided that they would put the two programs together and that they would prioritize their membership campaign over their annual appeal. The knowledge that they were pretty successful in retaining members made this a fairly easy choice, but you can imagine there was a lot of debate and discussion as they prioritized one effort over the other. And in 2009, they rolled out a brand new membership program with new higher dues amounts, new recognition society, new beautiful branding, new highly personalized appeals. And what happened was they had a growth in net revenue, particularly since they went from paying for two campaigns to one campaign. Overall revenue was up 4%, expenses went down 5%, and the net revenue increase was 17%. Through this redesigned approach, they are also seeing more success in attracting higher level memberships through the course of their regular appeals. The downside, as they learned, was that they suffered a drop in membership. And the good news is for them that that loss has been recovered over a period of several years. But what they realized as they got into this a little bit, that they maybe had changed more things than were needed or changed too much all at the same time. So lessons learned would be to be very careful and rigorous with your communications plan, because as you are introducing those changes, it can be confusing and difficult for folks who are not coming to your office every day. Perhaps the degree of change was just a little bit overly ambitious. The other thing they learned was that the more personalization that they could bring to the materials that they were putting in members' hands, the more successful those appeals would be. So the more any particular piece could reflect data they knew about the member, that's going to enhance the success of the appeal. And they got very aggressive and pretty ambitious about capturing little bits and pieces of data that could then be reflected back to members over the course of time. 3 years later, I'm really happy to tell you that their costs are even lower than what they realized by merging those two appeals. Retention is at 80%, and the number of members is growing, so all of their trend lines are going in the right direction. So a really interesting case study about an organization that looked at all these challenges, got their best thinking together, and tried a new approach, and I was happy to tell you that it's worked out well for them. as we look across this universe of organizations that need to raise money, a very consistent theme emerges. Whether or not we're talking about societies or cultural institutions, there's a consistent theme. Those that do a great job of engaging people who are interested in the organization are more successful raising money. And I know that seems kind of self-evident when you just say it like that, but I recognize that it's really easy for all of us to get caught up in the kind of means and methods and the details of our program. There's a lot of little bits and pieces that have to be addressed as we get all the various components to work together. And sometimes the fundamental lessons can get a little overlooked. The more we can do to engage people, the better off we are. So what Kat and I hope is that as you think about how to incorporate one or more of the ideas that we've shared in this webinar into your own efforts, that you'll start by stopping just for a moment to look in the proverbial mirror, and we have a short assessment tool to help get you started in that moment of reflection. And the first part of that tool is to ask yourself some hard questions about the way your efforts are unfurling. And these are 4 questions that we suggest will allow you to reflect on the experience that members are having as you are working to convert them to donors. I'm not going to read you these 4 questions. I know you can do that yourself. But we would like to say that once you have a good handle on the answers to these questions, we think you'll be in great position to think creatively about what more you need to know about members to reach your goals. Kat, perhaps you want to talk to us about the second part of the self-assessment.
Absolutely. Similar to what Eric has said about thinking about the qualitative situation of member experience, there are a series of questions one might pose in terms of what data you know about your ticket buyers and members, and where there's an opportunity to both expand what you know or to simply use and put into practice what you know about them in order to be more targeted in who you're approaching and how and why. And certainly if there are questions about any of these in follow-up, Eric and I are happy to engage, and we'd also like to be able to put you in touch with other clients doing creative and innovative work, as you might be interested in connecting with other people and what they've done as well. All right, we would love to be able to answer any further questions that you might have, and we'll stick around on the line for that. But we also know that your time is precious and that you need to get on with converting your ticket buyers to members and members to donors. So I want to thank all of you for spending some time with us today and your creative energy, and hopefully you've come away with a new nugget of something to try.
Kat, we do have an interesting question here that has to do with how some of these ideas might apply in a healthcare organization. In a situation where events are as much to raise awareness as well as funds, and where there's no kind of membership organization that might serve as a repository for anybody who shows up and expresses interest. And it's kind of a good news, bad news situation from where I'm sitting, because people are coming to these events and are having a learning opportunity. They're showing you what they're interested in, and you're delivering quality content in that moment. The bad news part of it is what you suggested in the question, which is there's no kind of easy place to corral people while you figure out who they are. And in a situation like that, I think the more you can know about who will be in the room, the better off you are, because that's a scenario in which you might want to identify who the top 5 or 10 or 15 people are that you would really like to meet beyond a kind of simple hello, I am sort of circumstance, and take advantage of those events to try to make those meetings happen. Kat had an example earlier in the webinar about a university theater that was doing a lot of research before a given performance and then thinking of that performance moment as an opportunity to put a development staff person or the president of the organization or the director of the production or the lead actor into the mix with people they were interested in developing a broader relationship with. So in a healthcare scenario, you might be thinking about volunteer leaders in the organization or the physicians and presenters or development staff, seeking out in the room those people that you know are capable of doing more for the organization and trying to begin a relationship. It gets... Go ahead, Kat.
No, I was just going to say, and certainly if you are already screening physician referral lists or patient lists and have a sense, as Eric was saying, not only of who's in the room, but who's in the room that has had experience with the hospital from a patient perspective, that adds one more layer of insight on who might be targeted at an event. I did want to just jump in. I know that we're losing some folks, but if you're able to take the poll on the right-hand side of the panel before you leave, we would love to know your feedback on today's session and how we can make future sessions even more helpful. And I think that what Eric was saying about events applies to events across organizations, of it being difficult to know who to reach out to, but that the research beforehand and the follow-up is the best case scenario.
With subscription-based screening services, the hard part becomes figuring out what to do with all the information you can gain, not so much how to get the information. So, and I think that's really the root of that last question.
Sure.